So, controversial topic, and I do preach, please stop what you're doing, stop disliking this video, and please do hear me out. I'm expecting a lot of dislikes for this video because Baby is a character who is from a pretty hated program by most of the fandom. However, I'm just going to put this out there myself. I don't particularly think Dragon Ball GT is a great show either. However, I think there's one saga in GT that is worthy of praise, and that is the Baby saga. There are other good things in Dragon Ball GT as well. It was mainly a show with some good ideas but really bad execution of said ideas. However, I personally think if Dragon Ball Super had a saga like the Baby saga in with the rest of the sagas that we got from Dragon Ball Super would have been an even richer show. Also, I'm proposing another rebooted character from the past, and obviously there's a lot of people out there in the fandom who mainly want to see new original characters. I'm the same, but I'll get to that more later in this video. I just want you to hold out and hear me out before you smash that dislike button. Anyway, just a quick question before we begin. Baby was a body snatcher ultimately, he was a parasite, but there was another body snatcher in Dragon Ball Super. Obviously Zamasu stole Goku's body in the Future Trunks saga. Obviously Baby and Goku Black have similarities, but they're also vastly different. So let me know who you think did it better. Whose body snatch was better? Baby's or Zamasu's? Or Goku Black, if you will, down in the comments section. I look forward to reading your answer. If you are new to the channel, please do hit that subscribe button as well as the bell button next to it, and turn all notifications on to be notified whenever I release new content. If you love Dragon Ball, you will love this channel. Hit that subscribe button. What's the worst that can happen? And thank you to everybody who have shown their continued support even since Dragon Ball Super's conclusion. I truly am humbled at your continued support and I am truly grateful. So like I was saying, I'm proposing a potential reboot to basically a character that's already been around before. Obviously he wasn't in the mainstream canon of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, just like Broly, who wasn't in the mainstream canon of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. He was a Dragon Ball Z movie character, but he is being rebooted for the upcoming Dragon Ball Super movie. He is going to be introduced and rebooted to be implemented into the lore of the mainstream canon of Dragon Ball Super. While some are not happy about seeing rebooted or returning characters, I personally do not mind rebooted or returning characters as long as they are done well. Been an avid comic reader for a long time now, and comics have always reproduced and recycled old villains, but effectively. Unfortunately, the returning villain in Dragon Ball Super, which was mainly Frieza, I know 17 returned as well, but he returned as a good guy. Frieza returned in ROF, which was pretty crap. It was easily the worst saga in the entirety of Dragon Ball Super, a series that I enjoyed, and it was unbefitting of the Emperor Lord Frieza, the most iconic villain in the entire franchise. However, you could argue that without the events and resurrection of F, him returning for the Tournament of Power would have made utterly no sense. So it did play some part in the conclusion of Dragon Ball Super. Regardless, it wasn't a good arc. The Resurrection of F saga could and should have been better. It deserved to be better. Unfortunately, I don't think they quite delivered on that. Broly, however, despite being around for decades, isn't really returning. He's being rebooted because, like I said just earlier, he was never really in the mainstream canon in the first place. He is being completely rebooted, and that would have to be the same case for Baby returning if they ever went down that route or took that avenue. Like I said, a lot of people don't like the fact that Dragon Ball are recycling villains. Let me know your thoughts on that. I personally don't mind it as long as we get original villains as well. I personally would like a ratio of 2 new original villains and then a recycled villain, because I do like seeing recycled villains every so often as long as they are portrayed well and have a good motivation beyond what they're now doing. Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comment section. So, Dragon Ball GT, it splits the fandom not even in half. I would say most people hate it, to be brutally honest. I personally think it gets more hate than it deserves, but some of the hate is warranted. The first 15 episodes of Dragon Ball GT were pretty much hot garbage. There was one good episode, I think it was episode 5, where Super Saiyan 2 Goku fights Legic. It was a cool fight, but that's it. Legic was an assassin. It was quite a cool antagonist, and it was implied that we would see him again in the future of the series. We didn't. However, from episode 16 onwards, we start to see fights between Goku and General Wildo, another quite cool antagonist, and eventually lead into the Baby saga, which for me was a good saga. In fact, the Baby saga was better than several Dragon Ball Super sagas. Not all of them, but better than most of them. Unfortunately for Dragon Ball GT, in my humble opinion, it was the only good arc they had. The Super 17 arc, I really didn't enjoy it. I preferred Android 17's new depiction in Dragon Ball Super, and the Shadow Dragon arc had some good fights, but 4 of the dragons were useless. Super Saiyan 4 Goku vs Nova and Ice Shenron were pretty cool, and obviously the final fight against a Mega Shenron was an epic fight. In Dragon Ball GT did end well, but the arc itself wasn't particularly good. The standout arc of Dragon Ball GT was simply the Baby Saga. Now by no means am I saying this saga was perfect either, but it was an entertaining and enthralling saga. We got to see an enticing villain who had a backstory rooted in the deep lore of the Dragon Ball verse. Baby was a product of the Tuffle race, who were originally living on planet Vegeta before the Saiyans literally exterminated them. Baby was pretty much a Tuffle supremacist, and his motivation was simply to revive the Tuffle race and exterminate the Saiyans. He's cunning enough to dominate the Z Warriors, possessing the likes of Gohan, Goten, Trunks, and even Vegeta. Ultimately, Baby is not instinctively acting on evil intention alone. He is an antagonist, but to the protagonist of the storyline. From his own perspective, he's the protagonist, but he is seeking vengeance for all the misery that was brought onto him and his race by the Saiyans, and he wants payback against those Saiyans. The one thing that did annoy me about Baby was the fact he was obsessed with Goku, who was essentially a low-class Saiyan at birth, rather than being obsessed with Vegeta, who was the prince of all Saiyans. However, despite my small annoyance there, it was refreshing to see a character who had motivations and desires, and ultimately saw himself as the protagonist in the story. After we had Boo, who I'm not disliking Boo for any reason, but he was ultimately just evil incarnate. He just wanted to cause chaos. He didn't really have any true motivations. And then you could also argue that Cell simply just wanted perfection. He didn't have any desires outside that. The Baby Saga also gave us more insight into the Tuffle and Saiyan War on planet Vegeta, which expands the lore of Dragon Ball, which is always a plus for me. Baby wasn't quite a true Tuffle either. During the Saiyan Tuffle War, the last of the Tuffles created genetically superior life forms, parasite-like organisms, which they infused with the DNA of the Tuffle King. These organisms were spread throughout the universe. Baby was simply the first Tuffle parasite to return and try to obtain vengeance against the Saiyans. He even created the universal suffragization plan. Sounds a bit familiar, doesn't it? Well, in Dragon Ball Super there were a lot of nods to Baby. I'm sure you remember Copy Vegeta, which was ultimately the result of the Kamasan draining Vegeta's power and taking on his form. It remarkably looked like Baby Vegeta. Baby literally became a parasite inside Vegeta's body and used Vegeta's power. Even had the cross lines on his face, which was similar to that of Vegeta in GT when he was infected by Baby. Then of course there's Goku Black. Whilst there's a lot of differences between Goku Black and Baby, ultimately Goku Black was a body snatcher just like Baby. Baby had the universe suffragization plan and Goku Black had the Zero Mortals plan. But the biggest nod to Baby had to be Watagosh in episode 73 of Dragon Ball Super. Watagosh was a dangerous parasitic criminal whom, just like Baby, were parasitic villains who used the hosts to increase their power. Once again, I'm not saying these characters are exactly the same, I'm just saying it seems like a nod towards Baby. Obviously, all these events took place in Dragon Ball GT and are not canon to the events that take place in the mainstream canonicity of Dragon Ball Super. So as far as we are aware, the Tuffles never created parasitic life forms that they sent throughout the universe to eventually get revenge on Saiyans. However, Tuffles do still exist in Dragon Ball Super, but not in Universe 7, but in Universe 2. One Tuffle named Zabuto participated as part of Team Universe 2 in the Tournament of Power, and obviously at the end of the Tournament of Power, Android 17 restored all the universes, so those Tuffles still exist in Universe 2. Obviously the Tuffles in Universe 2 don't particularly have a grievance with the Universe 7 Saiyans or even the Universe 6 Saiyans, but you know, Tuffles do exist in Dragon Ball Super, so there is an opening there, albeit small. And as Universe 6 is the twin universe to Universe 7, and the fact that the Saiyans on Universe 6 haven't actually left planet Sadal yet and obviously taking over planet Vegeta, Tuffles may still exist within Universe 6 as well. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Baby to be brought into Dragon Ball Super would have to be completely rebooted as a character, just as Broly's being rebooted in the upcoming movie. But I for one believe a villain with Baby's capacity and abilities would be a welcome addition to the Dragon Ball Super franchise. And another thing I liked about Baby actually was the fact that he divided and conquered the Saiyans. Obviously Goku eventually beat him with Super Saiyan 4, but Goku was getting his ass kicked for quite a while. As I stated earlier, I do want original villains, even more so than recycled villains or rebooted villains. But if they were going to recycle or reboot another villain from another part of the Dragon Ball franchise, I would like it to be Baby from Dragon Ball GT. And if this was to happen, in my preference, obviously because it's me putting it forward, it would have to happen quite far down the line in a hypothetical Dragon Ball Super series. The character would have to be completely rebooted rebooted, he could be made even better than what he was in GT, which would definitely be a welcome addition to the Dragon Ball Super franchise. He doesn't even have to be in Universe 7, he could be from one of the other universes, and we could get to see some universal or multiversal exploration on the behalf of the Z Warriors, as well as the fact that his power feels earned and it's quite legit. Obviously, he doesn't earn his actual power, he literally steals it, but because he's a parasite, it makes sense. In Dragon Ball Super, Jiren, who seemed like the ultimate powerhouse, it's hard to keep creating new villains and coming up with valid reasons as to why they're even more powerful than the last. Broly will most likely be more powerful than Jiren. How would you legitimize a new villain after Broly having a power level capable enough to compete with the likes of Goku as they are now? An intelligent, power-stealing parasitic life form named Baby may be one way to go about it. So obviously guys, we're just having a bit of fun here. If you still want to smash that dislike button, thank you for listening. I appreciate you listening, but go for it. But if Toriyama rang you tomorrow and said, we're going to recycle another villain, which one would you like it to be? And it was down to you, which villain would you pick? Could be from the Dragon Ball Z movies, could be from Dragon Ball GT, or even from Dragon Ball Heroes. Let me know your choice down in the comment section and why. And once again guys, Baby isn't as popular as Broly, so this is very unlikely to happen in the future anyway. It's just having a bit of fun and chatting about Dragon Ball, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please do lend me your energy and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Until next time, Ad Astra.